person. I would like to start by thanking the organizers for inviting me to this speak at the conference. Right, slides. These are the topics that I would like to discuss with you in the next 18-19 minutes. After a brief remarks on lightweight introduction on climate change and the law of the sea, explaining how global warming results in rising sea levels, I will focus on sea level rise, but not so much on the loss of land, which is of course ultimately the result of a rising sea level, but I will focus on the loss of maritime jurisdictional zones as a result of these shifting baselines. And then I come to what is related to the theme of these law sessions, law and justice in the global environment. Then I will come to potential adaptation measures, adaptation to counter the effects of the rising sea level on these maritime jurisdictional zones, potential laws. And I will end with a few concluding remarks. When we talk about climate change, it's always important to, and in relation to international law, I feel, it's always important to differentiate between the causes and effects. What causes climate change and what are the effects? We will be talking about the effects. Of course, the causes of global warming are that through the emission of greenhouse gases, there's global warming, and we need measures for prevention and mitigation. That whole area, these measures for prevention and mitigation of global warming, is the field of what we call international environmental law. When we talk about the effects and measures for mitigation and adaptation, here again, going back to the causes, the warming of the atmosphere through the greenhouse gases leads to warming of the ocean. The ocean, by the way, also acts as a reservoir of greenhouse gases, results in acidification of the ocean. Now, this ocean warming and acidification both together lead to a series of consequences and effects. You know, of course, about the melting of sea ice, especially in the north, the Arctic Ocean. In the summer, sea ice is melting considerably, which means that there is increasing access to northern routes, for instance, of Russia, from the east to the west, from the east. There's the rising sea level. Sea level has been rising for over a century, and the rate of increase is increasing considerably. Last century it was about 30 or 40, 45 centimeters in total. Predictions for this century are, conservative predictions are slightly less than 1 meter, but there are now predictions that it will be much more than 1 meter and a half or even more, and that is a considerable rise of sea level. There are some other effects on the ocean, changing ocean circulation patterns which can have all kinds of effects. Impacts on marine organisms, effects on productivity, range of fish stocks. And all of these consequences can have international legal implications. I'm not going to talk about those. I will focus here only on sea level rise. But it's good to realize that there is, in the context of climate change and in international law of the sea, there's a whole series of potential consequences that we will have to look at very carefully. Now, concentrating on the effects of sea level rise on maritime limits and boundaries, in particular low-lying states, and in more particularly low-lying island states, they are very vulnerable. States with low coasts and low-lying island states are particularly vulnerable. Here in the Indian Ocean, of course, the Maldives is a prime example. You have a few examples in the Atlantic and in the Caribbean area, but the main potential victims are in the South Pacific island states like Tuvalu, the Federal States of Micronesia, Marshall Islands, and a few others, which consist entirely of very low-lying islands. Now, obviously, when sea level rises, you lose land, or land becomes uninhabitable. There's no potable water left, for instance. The ocean advances as a result of sea level rise. And this raises all kinds of important questions, very essential questions for the populations of those areas. What should the people do? Emigrate? Or should they wait until they have to be evacuated? Or can the people be resettled? And if no population is left, or if no territory is left, what happens to the state? All those, again, are highly interesting questions. There is no time to deal with those, unless perhaps later, if there's time for discussion or questions, we can deal with that. I will focus on the laws, on one particular issue, the laws of sea areas, the maritime jurisdictional zones. And of course, we have to realize all the time that those sea areas are, especially for island states, are extremely important, sometimes for some island states even much more important, economically important, than their land areas where the people live. They may be dependent on income, for instance, from fisheries, from ocean areas. So resources are important, but also for trade, environmental issues that will arise, security. To look at the consequences for maritime limits and boundaries, we also have to realize what those maritime jurisdictional zones are under international law, and perhaps you know them. I will just mention them very briefly. All coastal states have what is called a territorial sea of a maximum of 12 nautical miles, which is 22 kilometers. But also, very importantly, they can have beyond the 12-mile territorial sea, they can have an exclusive economic zone up to 200 nautical miles, 370 kilometers. Also, continental shelf, which is only the seabed, which can even extend beyond 200 nautical miles. I will not go into that, it's very technical, complicated. And this is all regulated in international law, customary international law, but also in the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea of 1982, of which, of course, Sri Lanka is a party, and representatives of Sri Lanka played a hugely important role in the drafting of the 1982 Law of the Sea Convention. Now, all those distances, 12 miles, 200 nautical miles, are measured from what is called the baseline. And the baseline, the normal baseline, that is the low water line along the coast. There are also opportunities for states, in particular geographical circumstances, to draw straight baselines, but I will leave those aside. I will concentrate on the normal baseline, the low water line, which obviously will shift when sea level is rising, then the low water line is rising. What's this? These are, here you can see, again, the various maritime jurisdictional zones, starting from the land on the left, territorial sea, you have the territorial sea, and then 200-mile exclusive economic zone, and beyond that you have the international waters. Just to illustrate, explain a little bit more about the baseline, the low water line. This is an example of a tiny island, but of course it applies to any island. The coastline is, you can see the coastline, but these maritime jurisdictional zones are delimited, their limits are counted from this baseline, the low water line. Depending on tides, of course, and the gradient of the coast, the low water line can vary enormously, combination of tides, but also sea level rise. So what happens? The baseline shifts landwards when the sea rises. And the outer limit of these maritime jurisdictional zones at 12 miles, 200 miles, then would, of course, shift landwards correspondingly. In some cases, it's only a few meters if you have a steep coast. But for instance, the coast of Bangladesh, where you have areas where only after 30, 40, 50 or 60 miles you reach the height of 1 or 2 meters. the 1 meter rise of sea level could mean that you lose, that the baseline shifts landwards for dozens of kilometers, and the outer limits could then shift landwards for dozens of kilometers, so significant distances. There's one exception, which I must mention, and that is that if you have a neighboring country and you have had to make in a treaty a boundary delimitation, an agreement, in principle, that is a permanent location of the boundary, notwithstanding further later regression of the baseline. The line that is agreed as the boundary, the maritime boundary between the two states, will remain in place. In principle, I say there are some situations where this can become very complicated. I'll leave those aside because of lack of time. Now, as I mentioned, the effects depend very much on the gradient of the coastal area. And when you have low tide elevations off the coast, that can also have a significant impact. If they disappear because of sea level rise, you can no longer count those baselines also for measuring the breadth of your maritime zones. So potentially huge effects when small, especially when small low-lying islands are concerned. Just an example from the Kingdom of the Netherlands. I come from the Netherlands, but our kingdom extends also to the Caribbean. So in the Caribbean we have an island called Little Curacao. If sea level rises half a meter or slightly more, the whole island would disappear. This is the kind of islands that you see in many parts of the world. Sipadan off the coast of Borneo, again, 1 meter of sea level rise, the island would would soon vanish. Again, in the Caribbean, this is the tiny island, Venezuelan island of Isla de Aves. 1 meter sea level rise and it is gone, permanently gone. Well, here you see the map of the Caribbean with an arrow in the north pointing at Isla de Aves. If that island disappears, Venezuela would lose tens and tens of thousands of square kilometers of maritime area because it would no longer generate maritime zones, except in the cases where Venezuela has agreed maritime boundaries in treaties with the neighboring coastal states, which indicates how important it is to have in-time agreements. Oh, again, what is this? Yeah. A special issue concerns the possibility under international law that an island, which is any feature permanently above water at high tide, becomes a so-called rock, which means that it can no longer generate a 200-mile electricity economic zones, but can only have this 12-mile territorial sea. So it would lose a significant amount of maritime entitlement. An example is this is Okino Torishima, a Japanese island or rock, to the south of 600 miles to the south of Japan. It's the lowest circle. In the middle is Okino Torishima, bird island in Japanese. You see they claim 200 nautical miles for that rock. This is the rock that you saw earlier in the middle, now being conserved. Hundreds of millions of US dollars have been spent or are being spent to conserve the rocks of Okino Torishima. Here you see there are 3 tiny rocks. This is Okino Torishima that, according to Japan, generates 200 nautical miles. Huge area. And here you see the difference. If it is indeed an island, a fully entitled island, it would generate 431,000 square kilometers of sea area, which is 6-7 times the area of Sri Lanka, perhaps. If it's only a territorial sea, it would only generate 1,550 square kilometers of sovereignty for the area. Now I come to the theme, as I mentioned. What can we do about all this for the states, in particular island states, in some cases also continental states having these offshore features, to adapt to the rising sea level, but then adaptation measures to conserve, to maintain their jurisdictional zones, their maritime areas. well, I already mentioned, when you have neighbors, if you conclude delimitation agreements, in principle, you have safeguarded your entitlement to the area delimited, in principle. The other obvious solution, of course, is an artificial conservation of the natural baseline. By engineering works, you can conserve the baseline, build a dike. In the Netherlands, we have a lot of experience with building dikes, but that can be extremely expensive and often impractical. I will give you an example in a moment of a Pacific island state where that would obviously be completely impractical. But of course, this is something, I mean, Japan is clearly artificially conserving Okino-Torishima, as I demonstrated in the slide a few slides ago. And all states, many states are already taking these measures to artificially conserve by engineering works their baselines. Going over to the legal adaptation measures, one that has been suggested is that states could sort of claim historic waters. And of course, Sri Lanka has claims to one of the few states in the world which has claims to historic waters to the northwest area between Sri Lanka and India, Pal Bay, Gulf of Mannar. States could, in future, states affected by sea level rise, could claim their current maritime areas as a sort of historic waters. I don't think those are. Those would be valid claims, but it is one way to think about possible solutions. What is a better way for a solution is to develop simply new rules of international law, to create rules which provide an entitlement to coastal states to keep pre-existing outer limits of offshore areas that they are losing as a result of sea level rise. The reason for the development of such a new rule, I think, the idea behind that new rule, because the new rule would certainly be different from the current rules that say that the baselines can shift. So, in principle, outer limits would also shift landwards. But if you develop a new rule, you must have a reason for that, and the reason for that, in my view, would be simply summarized as justice. The countries most affected have themselves never contributed to the causes of sea level rise, global warming, but they are clearly the victims of the sea level rise. So why not entitle them to keep what they have in the current international law? Make new rules. You could make new rules, treaty rules, and the Sea Convention or a separate treaty. I don't think that this is very. That would probably be a very difficult way to approach it, but another approach might be a new rule of customary international law. That means that those states simply continue to exercise in practice their rights in those areas, keep those outer limits, and if other states agree, you have a new rule of customary international law. Now, in this area, the Indian Ocean, just a few more slides to demonstrate the various options. The island of Malé, the Maldives. This was, of course, a beautiful island with palm trees, etc., etc., nice beaches. It's now, in fact, become completely an artificial island. Sea defenses have been built. So this is the engineering option that has been, and in this case, it could very usefully be done. Tuvalu in the South Pacific is a totally different situation. Tuvalu, located here in the map, a series of islands, very low-lying islands. Not many people live there. This is the main island. This is how Tuvalu looks when sea level is rising as a result of storms. So the island quickly becomes uninhabitable. But if you would like to adapt the situation there to the sea level rise by physical defense, it's completely unrealistic. The main island of Funafuti, you would need 54 kilometers of sea defenses to maintain only 2.5 square kilometers of land area where a few thousand people live. So that doesn't seem very cost effective, if at all the cost can money can be found. So for Tuvalu and other island states like the Maldives and some others in the South Pacific in particular, the new rule, either treaty rule or rule of customary international law, entitling coastal states affected by sea level rise to be in the outer limits of their current maritime zones would be the most appropriate way to deal with that. So in my presentation I just dealt with one issue. There are many issues raised by climate change. I did dealt on with sea level rise and even to a limited extent. The conclusion is that we need creative, innovative approaches to cope with the consequences. International policy is constantly developing and will have to develop also here in this particular context. Thank you for your attention.